Jose grabbed the wheelchair handles and yanked it forward. The sudden shove sent James, his father, crashing to the floor. His body hit hard, the sharp sound stealing the air from my lungs. People who passed by our house in suburban Ohio probably thought we were an ordinary family. A small lawn, a worn mailbox, lights off early most nights. They didn't hear what happened inside. My husband, James Miller, was 63 that year. 10 years earlier, a construction accident had taken away everything people once admired about him. He had been a respected engineer, strong hands, steady voice, the kind of man others listened to. After the accident, he sat in a wheelchair. Most of the family believed he would never truly recover. I was 58. I cleaned offices, stocked shelves, and took any job that didn't ask too many questions. I never complained. Complaining doesn't pay medical bills. It doesn't put food on the table. Our son Jose was 29. He came and went as he pleased. Some weeks he acted like a stranger. Other weeks he acted like he owned the place. He always said he was figuring things out, but the truth had a way of following him home. Unpaid bills, angry phone calls, silence when questions got too close. Our daughter Maria was 21. She worked part-time while studying. Every paycheck she handed part of it to me without being asked. She never said much. She just looked at her father and smiled, as if love alone could keep him standing. That was our life. Then, one afternoon outside a grocery store, everything changed, and no one knew it but me. A small boy stood near the entrance holding lottery tickets. His legs were twisted, his voice barely louder than the traffic behind him. I bought one ticket. I didn't even look at the numbers when I put it in my pocket. 3 days later, the screen at the gas station froze. The cashier stared at me. Then she whispered, "Ma'am, you need to sit down." $1 billion. I remember gripping the counter so hard my hands hurt. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I felt something colder than fear. That night, I didn't tell James. I didn't tell Maria. And Jose would never hear it from me. Within a week, I met a lawyer, then a banker. Every dollar was sealed inside a private trust. No names, no access, no exceptions. At home, nothing changed. I still worked double shifts. I still counted coins at the kitchen table. I still listened to James apologize for being a burden, and I still told him he wasn't. Jose came home one evening smelling of expensive cologne, smiling too much. He hugged me longer than usual. "Mom," he said softly, "we should talk more. Family should be closer." I looked at his face and felt something tighten in my chest, because love doesn't arrive suddenly and kindness doesn't come with an agenda. That was when I knew. Our tragedy wasn't loud. It was already unfolding quietly, patiently, inside our own home. Looking back, their kindness didn't begin with guilt. It began with fear. At that time, Jose had no idea about the lottery ticket. If he had known, things would have moved faster, louder, uglier. But he didn't know, and that mattered because what he was after wasn't $1 billion. It was something much smaller and much closer, money he thought already belonged to him. Jose had gotten himself into trouble long before he started calling me Mom again. I didn't know the full story then, but pieces of it floated into our house like smoke. Short phone calls that stopped when I entered the room, late nights, the sound of his car pulling up long after midnight. What I didn't know was that Jose wasn't alone. There was a woman named Hannah. She didn't exist in our family photos. She wasn't mentioned at dinner, but she existed in hotel bills, credit statements, and a wedding that none of us were invited to. A wedding in Las Vegas. Lavish, loud, expensive. Jose and Hannah had borrowed over $150,000 to pay for it. They didn't borrow from a bank. They borrowed from people who don't wait politely, people who don't ask twice. When the calls started coming in, Jose panicked. That was when he remembered the house, our house, the one James and I had paid for years ago, the one with no mortgage, the one Jose had grown up in, the one he believed would someday be his anyway. He convinced himself it was only a matter of time. They're old, he told Hannah, according to what I later learned. They don't need all that space, and Dad can't even walk. In his mind, the plan was simple. Act loving, act patient, stay close, find the safe, find the documents, get access to cash. Hannah agreed. She was practical in a way that scared me later. She didn't talk about love, she talked about timing. A week after the worst of the debt threats began, Jose showed up with flowers, real flowers, not the cheap kind. He offered to push his father's wheelchair around the block. Hannah appeared at my side in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, asking if I needed help. I watched them carefully. People don't change overnight, but desperation can teach them how to perform, and that was exactly what they were doing. They weren't becoming better children, they were preparing to take what they believed was already theirs. Their act didn't feel rushed. That was the most unsettling part. Jose didn't suddenly become affectionate overnight. He eased into it, like someone testing thin ice. One small gesture at a time, just enough to look convincing. He began waking up early. That alone should have warned me. Every morning, he pushed his father's wheelchair down the street, slow and careful, greeting neighbors we hadn't spoken to in years. He laughed loudly, asked James questions he already knew the answers to, told the same stories again as if repetition could erase the past. "Dad needs fresh air," he said. "Doctor's orders." James nodded. He always nodded. Inside the house, Hannah played her part just as carefully. She called me Mom with a softness that sounded rehearsed. She washed dishes without being asked. She folded laundry as if she'd done it her whole life. She asked about my work, my back pain, my sleep. Too many questions. People who truly care don't collect information like that. I watched her eyes more than her hands. They moved constantly toward drawers, cabinets, the hallway leading to our bedroom, toward the places where people hide things they don't want found. At dinner, Jose insisted we eat together. No phones, no distractions. "We've all been too distant," he said. "Families should stick together." Maria looked confused but hopeful. James looked grateful. I looked tired. They praised James for being strong. They praised me for holding everything together. Compliments poured out like coins, small, shiny, and meaningless. Still, I said nothing, because sometimes silence tells you more than confrontation ever could. One evening, Jose brought home groceries, expensive ones, steak, imported fruit, things we never bought. Hannah smiled and said, "You deserve better, Mom." That was when I understood the structure of their performance. They weren't giving, they were investing. They needed us comfortable, distracted, trusting. They needed James weak and grateful, me softened by kindness, Maria pushed quietly to the side. And above all, they needed time. At night, when the house finally went quiet, James whispered apologies for not doing more. I squeezed his hand and told him to rest. Because I could feel it. This kindness had an expiration date, and when it ran out, they wouldn't be gentle. I didn't confront them. I changed the rules instead. One morning, I came home later than usual, my shoulders slumped, my shoes still dusty from work. I sat at the kitchen table longer than necessary, counting the same bills again and again. Jose noticed immediately. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I sighed, slowly, deliberately. "Your father's medication went up again," I said. "The insurance won't cover all of it. I'm not sure how long we can manage." I watched their faces. Hannah's smile tightened for half a second. Jose's eyes flicked, not to me, but toward the hallway, toward the bedroom, toward the places that mattered. "I'll take more shifts," I added. "Maybe I can find another job on weekends." That night I left the lights on late and spread papers across the table, old medical receipts, overdue notices I had saved for years. None of them were new, none of them were lies, but the picture I painted was clear. We were running out of time. José suddenly became more attentive. He asked about the safe, casually, as if the thought had just occurred to him. "Dad still keeps important things locked away, right?" he said one evening. "You never know with emergencies." Hannah nodded. "It's risky to keep cash at home," she added, "but older people feel safer that way." I smiled and said nothing. Maria, on the other hand, believed me. That broke something inside my chest. She picked up extra shifts without telling me, slipped money into my bag when she thought I wasn't looking, gave up her weekends, her rest, her youth. I wanted to stop her, but this test wasn't just for José and Hannah, it was for me too, to see who would step forward when things got hard and who would start calculating exits. James played his part perfectly. He apologized more, ate less, asked for nothing. Some nights I heard him crying quietly in the dark. Each time I reminded myself why I was doing this, because generosity without boundaries creates entitlement, and I needed to know how far José would go once he believed there was nothing left to lose. The answer came faster than I expected. Once José believed we were cornered, he stopped circling. He went straight for the foundation. The house. It started as a suggestion, carefully worded, disguised as concern. "Mom," he said one afternoon, leaning against the kitchen counter, "have you ever thought about putting the house in my name?" I didn't look up right away. I kept washing the same cup over and over, letting the silence stretch. "In your name?" I asked finally. "Just temporarily," he said quickly, "so I can use it as collateral. I could get a loan, start a business, help with Dad's expenses." Hannah joined in without missing a beat. "It's practical," she said. "Banks trust younger borrowers, and honestly, holding on to property at your age is risky." At your age. The words landed exactly where she intended. I dried my hands slowly. "And what happens if the business fails?" I asked. José laughed, too loudly. "It won't." James sat quietly in his wheelchair, his hands folded, eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The weight of the question pressed on him more than anyone else. From that day on, the pressure became routine. José brought pamphlets from banks. Hannah talked about financial planning. They framed it as responsibility, as maturity, as love. "Dad deserves better care," José said one night. "Don't you want that?" I noticed how often they said Dad and how rarely they said you. They weren't asking permission. They were testing resistance. Maria finally spoke up at dinner. "If the house goes into José's name," she asked quietly, "where does that leave Mom?" José didn't hesitate. "You're too young to understand," he snapped. "This is adult business." The room went still. That was the moment I saw it clearly. To José, this house wasn't a home. It was leverage, a piece on a board he felt entitled to move. That night, Hannah stood in the hallway outside our bedroom longer than necessary. I heard drawers open softly, too softly. They weren't waiting anymore. They were preparing. And once someone decides your shelter is negotiable, everything else becomes fair game. When the house didn't move, they changed tactics. Pressure turned into threat. José stopped pretending patience. His voice grew sharper, his footsteps heavier. He began hovering near his father more than necessary, standing too close, speaking too loud. "Dad," he said one evening, "you still keep important things locked up, right?" James looked up slowly. "What things?" "Documents, insurance papers, cash," José replied. "Stuff we might need if something happens." Something happens. Hannah stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding along. "It's irresponsible to keep secrets from your own son," she added, "especially when medical emergencies are involved." James glanced at me. I lowered my eyes. That silence hurt him more than words ever could. The next day, Jose brought brochures for assisted living facilities. Cheap ones, the kind with small print and smiling faces that didn't reach the eyes. "Just options," he said, placing them on the table, "in case Mom can't handle everything alone." James's hands trembled. He folded the brochures carefully and said nothing. That night, Hannah went straight to the point. "If you give us the key," she said calmly, "we can manage things better. Otherwise, maybe it's time to think about professional care." She reached for James's hand, not gently, demandingly. Jose stood close enough that his shadow covered his father's face. For a moment, I thought James would speak, argue, refuse. Instead, he reached into his pocket and placed the small metal key on the table. The sound it made still echoes in my head. Hannah grabbed it before I could move. She walked straight to the bedroom, straight to the closet, straight to the safe. Drawers opened, paper shuffled. I heard the dull thud of disappointment. There wasn't much inside. Some documents, old savings bonds, nothing close to what they expected. Jose's face darkened. "You're hiding something," he accused, turning to me. "I know you are." James stayed silent, his jaw tight, eyes glassy with pain, not from his body, but from what he was witnessing. That was the night I realized something else. They weren't afraid of crossing lines anymore. They believed those lines belonged to them. Maria didn't plan to confront Jose. It happened because lies have a way of slipping. She came home earlier than usual one evening, her face pale, her hands shaking as she set her bag down. She didn't look at me at first. She went straight to her father and knelt beside his wheelchair. "Dad," she asked quietly, "when were you going to tell us?" James looked confused. "Tell us what?" She turned to Jose then. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "I ran into someone from college. She congratulated me on your wedding." The room froze. Jose didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He smiled. "So you know," he said. "Good. It saves time." "A wedding?" Maria whispered. "You got married without telling Mom, without telling Dad?" Hannah stepped forward, chin lifted. "It wasn't your business." That was when Maria stood up. "This family paid for everything you ever had," she said, her voice breaking, "and you couldn't even tell them the truth?" Jose's smile vanished. "You don't get a say," he snapped. "You don't contribute anything real to this house." I felt my chest tighten. Maria had been paying bills quietly for years, giving without asking, loving without conditions. Jose knew that, and he erased it anyway. "You're not on the deed," he continued coldly. "You're not married. You're temporary." Temporary. The word hit like a slap. Maria looked at me then, searching my face. I couldn't protect her anymore, not from this truth. I watched something change inside her, the hope drained out, replaced by clarity. "You already decided," she said softly. "You just wanted us quiet." Laura witnesses everything, helpless. That night, Maria packed a small bag and went to stay with a friend. She didn't slam the door, she didn't cry, and somehow that silence hurt Jose more than any argument, because for the first time someone stopped playing their role, and that frightened him. There was something Jose never noticed. He was too busy measuring what he could take. James wasn't as helpless as he looked. The truth was, my husband had been improving for years, slowly, quietly, in ways no one celebrated. Physical therapy sessions at dawn, pain swallowed without complaint, steps practiced alone, gripping the edge of the bed until his knuckles turned white. 90% recovered. Doctors had been cautiously optimistic. They said with consistency, patience, and support, he could walk again. Not perfectly, not easily, but independently. James chose silence. He didn't want to be a burden, that was the word he used, over and over. He believed that if he stayed in the wheelchair, expectations would stay low. People wouldn't look at him with disappointment if he fell short. And when Jose started drifting away years ago, James blamed himself. "If I were stronger," he once told me, "he wouldn't feel trapped." When Jose's behavior changed, when the kindness felt staged, when questions became demands, James understood before I did. But instead of standing up, he stayed seated. He wanted to see how far his son would go. So he exaggerated his weakness, let his hands shake a little more, let his voice sound softer, let Jose believe the wheelchair defined him. Every humiliation was a test, every threat another answer. The night Jose pushed him too hard, standing over him, voice sharp, eyes impatient, I saw James's jaw tighten, his legs tensed under the blanket. He could have stood then. He didn't. Later, when we were alone, he whispered, "Let it finish." That broke my heart, but I understood. Some truths only reveal themselves when people believe there are no consequences left. James wasn't pretending to trap our son. He was letting Jose expose himself fully, without excuses, without masks. Because once someone shows you who they are when they think you're powerless, there's no misunderstanding left. And when the moment finally came, there would be no denial. Desperation strips people of patience. By the time Jose reached that point, he was no longer pretending to care who saw it. The threats from his creditors had grown louder. Hannah paced the house like a caged animal. Every drawer they opened came up empty. Every document they found led nowhere. They were running out of options. That night, Jose stormed into the living room without greeting anyone. His eyes went straight to his father. "Where are the papers?" he demanded. "The real ones." James looked up at him, calm, too calm. "I already gave you everything," he said quietly. Jose laughed. "Don't lie to me." He grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and yanked it forward. The sudden motion sent James crashing to the floor. His body hit hard, the sound sharp enough to steal the air from my lungs. "Jose!" I screamed. James groaned, his hand scraping against the floor as he tried to steady himself. Jose didn't help him up. He stepped over his father and went straight for the bedroom. Drawers flew open, the closet door slammed, papers were thrown aside in a frenzy. Hannah stood frozen at the doorway, her face pale, her breathing shallow. "This is your fault," she whispered. "You said they had money." James lay on the floor, his face twisted in pain, not just from the fall, but what had finally been proven. I knelt beside him, my hand shaking, my heart breaking in ways I didn't know were possible. That was the moment I stopped waiting. I didn't call the police, not yet. I helped James back into his wheelchair. He gripped my arm harder than ever before. I felt the strength in his legs, fighting to rise. He stayed seated, because this wasn't the end. It was the last step before the truth, and once it came out, there would be no way back for Jose. The meeting was Jose's idea. By then, he believed intimidation had worked. He thought fear had softened me. He thought his father's fall had broken what little resistance remained. "We should make this official," he said the next morning, his tone suddenly calm, "for everyone's sake." Hannah nodded beside him. "Paperwork protects families," she added, "especially when emotions are high." I agreed. That surprised them. I dressed carefully that day, plain clothes, no jewelry, the same worn shoes I wore to work. I let them believe I was tired, defeated. The lawyer's office was quiet when we arrived, too quiet for Jose to notice what was waiting behind closed doors. James was pushed inside in his wheelchair, his hands rested on his knees, still, composed. Maria wasn't there. Jose assumed she didn't matter anymore. The lawyer greeted us politely and asked everyone to sit. Jose leaned forward first. "My mother is ready to transfer the house," he said confidently. "She understands it's the only solution." The lawyer looked at me. "Mrs. Miller." I nodded. "Yes," I said, "but before we sign anything, there are a few things you should know." Jose smiled. Hannah squeezed his hand. They thought this was the end. They didn't notice the second door open behind them. 2 police officers stepped in quietly, then a representative from the bank, then another lawyer, mine. Jose turned pale. "What is this?" he asked sharply. I folded my hands in my lap. My voice didn't shake. "This," I said, "is the truth." Jose stood up so fast, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is a setup," he said, pointing at me. "You can't do this." The lawyer didn't raise his voice. He simply slid a folder across the table. Inside were timelines, statements, recorded messages, medical reports, bank notices. Evidence doesn't argue, it waits. The bank representative spoke next. "Mrs. Miller has no personal liquid assets accessible to this household," he said calmly, "because all winnings were secured in a private trust months ago." Jose frowned. "Winnings?" I took a slow breath. "I bought a lottery ticket," I said. "I won $1 billion." The room fell silent. Hannah's hand slipped from Jose's. "You're lying," she whispered. My lawyer shook his head. "Every dollar is documented. The trust was established immediately. No beneficiary changes can be made without court approval." Jose laughed, but there was panic in it. "So what? It's still her money." "It's protected money," the lawyer corrected, "and after recent events, access is no longer a discussion." One of the officers stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, we have reason to believe there has been coercion, financial abuse, and physical endangerment of a disabled adult." Jose turned to his father. "Dad, say something." That was when James placed his hands on the arms of the wheelchair. Slowly, deliberately, he stood up. Not fully, not easily, but enough. The sound of the chair moving back echoed through the room. "I've been standing for years. I just needed to know who you'd be if you thought I couldn't." James stared at him, his mouth open, his face drained of color. Hannah took a step back, then another. "I didn't sign up for this. You said they were weak." I looked at her for the last time. "We were patient," I said. "There's a difference." Jose collapsed into his chair. The confidence was gone, the entitlement with it. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. Jose didn't leave the lawyer's office that day as a son. He left as a defendant. The officers spoke to him calmly, professionally. They explained his rights. They explained the charges. Emotional abuse, coercion, attempted financial exploitation, endangerment of a vulnerable adult. Each word landed heavier than the last. Hannah stood frozen for a moment, as if waiting for someone to protect her. When no one did, she reached for her purse. "I didn't know," she said quickly. "This isn't my problem." She didn't look back when she walked out. That was the last time I saw her. Jose tried to speak, to explain, to bargain. But bargains don't erase patterns, and bargains don't work once the truth is written down. He was escorted out quietly. Jane sat back down, exhausted. Standing had cost him more than he showed, but there was something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Relief. In the weeks that followed, the house felt different. Not lighter, clearer. James resumed physical therapy openly this time. Every step was slow, painful, real. Maria came back home. She walked beside her father, counting steps, laughing when he cursed under his breath. Healing isn't dramatic. It's consistent. Jose's case moved forward. His name appeared in documents instead of family records. He was formally removed from any claim to our estate, permanently, legally. No appeals, no exceptions. When the time came, I spoke publicly for the first time. $500 million was placed into a foundation for children with disabilities and for families affected by serious accidents. I had already met some of them. I had already seen what support could change. The remaining assets were placed into a protected trust. Maria was named the sole beneficiary. She didn't ask for it. She didn't want it. That was exactly why she deserved it. "You gave without calculating," I told her one evening as we sat at the kitchen table. "That's the difference." She cried then, not because of the money, but because someone finally saw her. James continued to improve. He walked with a cane now, some days farther than others. On difficult mornings, Maria held his arm. On better days, he insisted on doing it himself. We learned how to live without fear. One afternoon, James reached for my hand and said, "I wish I had stood sooner." I squeezed his fingers. "You stood when it mattered." The house stayed in our name, but more importantly, our dignity did too. People often ask me if I regret not telling my family about the lottery sooner. I don't, because money doesn't reveal character, pressure does. And when everything was on the line, only one child chose love over entitlement. Only one chose family over gain. Money comes and goes, but kindness, loyalty, and filial devotion, those are the things that last.